Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Laugh at Pat podcast, hashtag Patchats. Today's podcast is a conversation with Adam Margulies. If I were a professional broadcaster, professional podcaster, I would have clarified on the pronunciation of his last name instead of just brutalizing that pronunciation in his introduction. But you know what? Laugh at Pat is not exactly known for professionalism. So I am sorry, Adam, and to all of you who might be sensitive to name mispronunciation, I do apologize to you. But Adam is one half of the comedy music duo Two Jews, who play often at open mics and various shows around here in Berlin, and had been scheduled, according to their website, to do a show in Munich in November before the lockdown prevented all of that. But they are really, really funny. It's Adam, I won't butcher his last name again, and Eel, and they have a wonderful stage presence together. They play off of each other really well. They push the line in exactly the way I love it to be kind of pushed in a playful way, but challenging sometimes to the audience, which I think is hilarious. And they use the kind of tool of their musicality really to their advantage. And I said this to Adam at the beginning of our conversation, but you know, they were one of those people that anytime I saw that I was on one of the shows with them, I always stuck around and made sure to watch their performance because they're really funny. It was always fun to see the way they had kind of tinkered with one of the songs that they were working on since the last time I had seen them. And they just always had really good performances, and I really thoroughly enjoyed them. And the thing I didn't say to Adam is actually, you know, the time when I first met him was kind of living out a little bit of a comedy fantasy for me when I got back in the fall and started doing the open mics again more regularly. We were sitting out on the patio at the Laughing Spree at the Floating Lounge on Mondays and Tuesdays here in Berlin. If you're around, it's a great comedy show, so check it out. But we were hanging out on the patio, and I think I had already gone up, and he was waiting to go up, and we were sitting around with a couple of other comedians, having a beer, shooting the shit. And you know, I get a thrill out of getting to be on stage and, you know, try to get an audience reaction or not get an audience reaction. I mean, that's part of the thrill as well, right? But also, I mean, I've been a huge fan of comedy for a long time and listened to countless comedy podcasts and watched countless comedy documentaries. And, you know, such a huge part of that that you hear about from comedians is that aspect of getting to hang out with other comedians and bullshit and shoot the shit. And I don't know, I just remembered that evening specifically as really feeling like, oh man, like I'm like hanging out with some other comics, like we're shooting the shit. It was, you know, and Adam was very funny off the stage and on the stage. And so I reached out to him and asked if he would be willing to sit down and talk. And we had a really interesting conversation, a fun conversation. We talked about, you know, he was born in Israel and then moved to New York, and he studied opera. So we talked about kind of the world of opera and his journey within that. And then we talked about how he started doing comedy and, you know, the creative process and whatnot. And so Adam he was really fun to talk to. He's a really nice guy, and I really enjoyed our conversation, which I hope you will as well. Definitely check out the Two Jews website, twojews.de. They're also on Instagram at Two Jews. I will link to all of that in the description below, but definitely go check out their stuff. They're very funny, and if you ever get a chance, I definitely recommend seeing one of their shows. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation. My talk with Adam, one half of the hilarious comedy duo, Two Jews. We don't know each other super well, but I have to say, like, for me, this is the highest compliment that I could really give. But running into, or whenever I saw that you guys, the two Jews, were performing at any of the open mics, like, you were really the only people that every single time I had to stay and see you guys perform, because it was, I mean, hilarious, and just, it was just always really, really good.
Oh man, thank you so much.
But I wanted to start by, so you guys kind of have like a musical comedy duo called
Yeah.
Two Jews. And so I guess the first place I wanted to start was asking, just like, like, what was it like growing up Catholic?
Well, I certainly hated the Jews, but they just kept eating our babies, and then one day I ate a Catholic baby, and I was like, "Damn, it's delicious. I gotta convert."
Yeah. No, but really,
It's
so
weird.
I
I
did.
ate a Catholic baby, and all of a sudden my horns came out. You know, crazy. A lot of people think they come out of your head. They don't. It's out of the back of your knees. Weird.
It
Too
sounds
far.
like an uncomfortable place to have your horns be, but
That's called the Jewish clitoris behind the knee. You know.
no, but so I wanted to ask you, so where did you, obviously, like, I met you here in Berlin, but where did you grow up, and like what was that like?
I was born in Israel, in Jerusalem, and
Hmm.
then after the first Gulf War, we moved to New York, my family and I, in '91, and then I grew up in Westchester, outside of the city. And then
And
once
so
I turned 16 or 17, I moved into the city, and I lived there till I came here to Berlin
so how
5
old
years
were
ago.
you then when you came over to the States?
6 or 7 years old.
6 or 7. So was
Something like
that like, were you already speaking English at that point, or did you
No, well, yeah, because where we lived in Jerusalem, there was a large community of there were a bunch of ambassadors. So there was like a kindergarten that was an English speaking kindergarten. So my parents put me there, but it wasn't like an English speaking household or anything like that. Like by chance, the kindergarten was across the street, and they happened to speak English. So like they didn't care if it was fucking Swahili. They would
yeah,
just
it was
being
just
that kid, it was like across the street, Swahili kindergarten.
yeah.
Yeah. Which is
uh
something that I might do for my son, because there's a Portuguese kindergarten across the street from where I live, and I'm like, I don't. He can learn Portuguese. I don't give a fuck.
yeah.
You know.
Honestly, I mean, not a bad place, like, if he develops his Portuguese, and then, not a
Hey,
bad place to come visit him.
there you go.
Yeah. Wait,
I don't
so
know.
do you have like memories from being in Jerusalem, or are those kind of
Yeah, no, I
more?
remember. I remember Jerusalem. I mean, I don't remember the city well at all, but I remember being there. I remember the house. Remember my family, and I had some friends. And yeah, I was pre latency, but post consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, I was aware.
And so you said that you guys, after the first Gulf War, was that like part of the reasoning why you guys moved, or was that just like as a
I
timestamp,
actually,
basically?
I actually say that because it sounds dramatic, and then people ask like, "Oh, was the war or whatever?" But as a matter of habit, I say that. But no, like it was just around that time, and like I mean, it was quite a. I remember. I mean, at the time, it seemed pretty cool because I was a kid, but like it was quite a significant event, I think, in our lives. And I remember when I just remember not going to school for the year, and like wearing gas masks and like taping up like all sorts of people. We had a big house in Jerusalem that was made of Jerusalem stone, so it was technically considered a bomb shelter. So like a lot of neighbors came and stayed at the house and whatever. Anyway, so I kind of remember things like that. But then no, it was my dad had some job opportunity in the States, and we decided to go. He decided to take the family there, and then they ended up staying because life was so much better in the States at that time.
Yeah.
here in Israel. I mean, still better in the States than in Israel, but
Well, that's like kind of crazy. Like, I don't know. Do you reflect at all about like how that affected you? I mean, just like I feel like now, like my friends and I have talked about like with the coronavirus and stuff, like what kids who are, 5 or 6 years old, like what is the effect of this going to be on them? Like, are we going to have a bunch of super crazy germaphobe children or like really wild, like don't give a fuck children? I imagine like
uh,
running around with gas masks as a child, it must have had some effect.
yeah, I don't remember being particularly scared or anything like that. I guess my parents did a good job of keeping things calm or whatever. But I think like a bigger, like a little more traumatic or more dramatic change in my life was moving from like right after that in Israel to the States. So like the Gulf War happened, I think in 1990. So I was 5 or 6, and then like a year after that, we moved to the States. But like I don't remember. I remember being really annoyed because like everybody had a cool gas mask and I had like a child's gas mask that had this weird plastic bag. It was really fucking. But it was weird. Like you'd have to walk like to everywhere you went. You had to walk with like a little lunch box that had your gas mask in it, and yeah, but it wasn't. I don't remember it being
And
terribly.
kids were like, you have the gross off-brand gas mask.
Yeah,
You can't
no,
play with us. We don't. We
it
can see from
came
your
in these
lunchbox.
cool. It came in these really cool like neon green lunchbox. It was fucking awesome. But anyway, yeah. So, but no, I don't. I wonder if what kind of effect it had on me. It was definitely like a cool thing later. Like it's like so I was in New York like during September 11th, and then I always say like, oh, I was in New York during September 11th. Like it gives you a little cred.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like I could always be like, yeah, we came to the States after the first Gulf War.
yeah, yeah. I
like
mean, you have quite the tragedy resume.
I know, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
You know,
just fingers crossed that you can be near another terrorist attack,
who
or
knows? Maybe it's the reason. It could be the reason why I'm like a morbidly obese. Fuck, like who knows? Like maybe that's the reason. Like I was afraid for death because of death. I'm like, I'll eat whatever, anything and everything. Like it could be
yeah.
the Gulf War.
Well, so you
Yeah.
mentioned that the more traumatic thing was moving to the States. Was that like a hard transition? I mean, I just like from my own childhood, like those were kind of the most difficult years of my life
Hmm.
in general. Like I mean, just as far as like fitting in. And so coming in from the outside, having a different culture or whatever, I can imagine that there might be some growing pains there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like I never felt American, and I never felt Israeli. And at the time, like I kind of, kids are kind of they adapt really easily. So I don't think I had a big like anything terribly traumatic happen. I remember like there were a few times that I got lost and I couldn't say where the fuck am I or whatever, but there was nothing terribly traumatic. But I think later I never really identified with a lot of American things that a lot of people around me had. And I think part of it is because, we were basically always speaking Hebrew at home. I have 3 brothers and my parents, we all speak Hebrew still today with the ones that actually still speak to each other. And so, but I'm definitely not Israeli, and I'm definitely I like sometimes I speak English and I'm like, ugh, how, and it's like the dumbest things, like all sorts of colloquialisms, like I'll say "juit," and for anybody who doesn't speak New York, that is, did you have something to eat today?
Oh
And
yeah.
so you say
Honestly, I was
"juit,"
like, I'm just gonna wait and see if I could
yeah,
catch on later. I
right.
didn't get it on the first
So,
try.
and I'll be like, oh my God, you sound like such a schmuck, Jude. Who the fuck? It's like, so, but, these are my own fucked up, unconscious, self hating Jew things.
Yeah. Was there a divide between like coming as like Israeli Jews and then like was there a
Oh,
like
of
an
course.
American Jewish community around you guys where you were
Oh, well,
or
we had no like yeah. So Westchester, which is north of the city, north of Manhattan, by about I don't know 30 minutes drive or something like that. It's all like fucking hardcore Guidos and Jews, American Jews, and it's a super wealthy area. And so I grew up with the Sopranos, like the
yeah.
actual Sopranos, like that shit. Like I swear that show was based off of my town. Like I had fucking Tommy Rittati's and all these fucking crazy Italian dudes. And the rest were all like Wall Street Jews, like fucking Goldman Sachs style Jews, and yeah, there was totally different, like very little connection to American Jews in the area. Like any friends that my parents had were, I mean, there were of course some connection to like whatever people around, but they were all with the Israeli community. Like but I don't think I had any Israeli friends. Like all my friends were Americans.
Uh-huh.
I had no particularly Jewish connection, except, and I still don't. And but I would make sure that like that I was Israeli. Like when if I was a Jew, I would be an Israeli Jew. And
Yeah.
it's like there was this Howie Mandel had this decent joke about like an American Jew will do your taxes, an American Jew will give you a root canal, and an Israeli Jew will say, "Hold my Uzi while I take a piss." And like, there's some truth in that. Like, there's some the kind of nebbishy Woody Allen style Jew doesn't really thrive in Israel.
Yeah.
It's a very super aggressive culture, you know.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've noticed a little bit of that. Like, when I was traveling a little bit when I was younger, there was all of like the groups of Israelis who had just gotten out done with their like military service, and now we're
Yeah,
doing like the post military service. And I had some like interesting conversations with some of those people. But yeah,
yeah. I mean, a lot of fucking dumbass racists, and like you have it runs the gamut, but in
yeah,
Israel, but it's
but also
overall I'd say it's a really aggressive culture in terms of like they're just pushy people, and it makes sense that they're pushy, like considering the foundation of the country and the kind of it's a really weird culture because it's so disparate. Like on one hand, you have like I'm an opera singer by trade. That's where I kind of grew up in the opera, and like the best fans, the best audiences I ever encountered were in Israel because people fucking love it. They love culture in Israel. But they'll stand in the lobby of the opera and just fucking yell and curse at each other, and like they're super aggressive. They'll push you out of the way. They'll cut you in line. So and it comes basically from this like super educated European Jewry that escaped the Nazis and came to Israel and had to basically struggle to survive, and it kind of hardened them up.
yeah. Uh, the the I want to talk about the opera thing because you had mentioned that offhand before when we met, and I thought that was like super interesting. But just to circle back to your childhood again, you were talking about the growing up around these like Sopranos type people.
Yeah.
Were there some of like were there some of those kids that your parents were like, dude, you can't hang out with Tony anymore or whatever whoever kid, or
Nah,
was it not really
I
at
don't
that
think.
level?
No, my parents didn't give a shit. I don't think they knew like any. Nah, I didn't care.
Yeah.
Like they didn't care. Like they didn't. They still like they didn't. None. All my brothers and I, none of us are with Jewish girls, and like they don't. My wife is Colombian. My brother's wife is Japanese. Another one is German. Like and So we're missing, a black girl, and you know,
Yeah.
we'd be like the modern family. But no, my parents didn't care about that at all.
Where do you fall in the three brothers?
I'm number three.
You're
Like,
number
and I
three.
have one younger and two older.
Okay. Gotcha. Um, and is there like a pretty decent spacing between you guys, or?
It's weird. My older two brothers are 1 year apart, and they're 7 and 8 years older than me. And then my younger brother and I are 5 years apart. So I'm in the middle, like quite far from both.
But so was it like pretty rambunctious, or was it kind of just like your older brothers, when they were teenagers, you guys were kind of like young kids, and so they were doing their own thing, or?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were pretty well. My oldest brother was always quite nice to me. The next brother used to beat the shit out of me, which was weird because he's 7 years older. Like, he used to really fuck me up.
Yeah, it's a little
Um,
too old to just be like, fuck you.
yeah, but we fixed everything. Now we're good. But so yeah, they were kind of separate, and they had a kind of, and they also had essentially like a different set of parents. Like, we have the same parents, but you know, they were my for 26 when they had them, and they were 35 when they had me. So they had more time, they had more money, they were more comfortable. Like, I had a much more hands-on. My younger brother and I had a much more hands-on upbringing than my older brothers. And moreover, like, my older brothers grew up, they were city kids that grew up in Jerusalem, and they were super independent at that time in Jerusalem. Like, it was pretty much before bus bombings and things like that. So like, they would just run around the city doing whatever they want, and then, like, real latchkey kids in that sense. And no, but for me, like, I was a total daddy's boy, just hanging out at home.
Yeah. Did you get along better with your dad than with your mom?
Yeah, we definitely had more shit in common. Uh, Especially once I got into sort of my teenage years and things like that. And my mom is much kind of, I'd say, more critical, definitely more critical, but much more idealistic in the way she wants things to be. She's very concerned with the way things look and things like that. And for her, being a fat kid was like the blemish on the way the family looked. You know what I mean? And my dad's
Yeah.
also like a pot-bellied guy, but I was kind of fat all my youth. So we had there was a lot of contention around that, and they didn't get along so well. My parents, they were kind of not a very they weren't super communicative with each other in terms of, like, there was always stress every couple of months. It was like, oh, are they gonna, like, the fear that they would separate and divorce, and what would happen. And it's like this kind of, they did divorce, but after 43 years of being together, which is
Yeah.
so dumb. I just
Yeah.
don't get it. It's like, just go fuck other people, and just come home, and have your whatever.
Yeah. You grinded it out for 43 years, it's like throwing away your punch card at, punch number 8 or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Something like that. Because then they're really left with, they kind of have no shared they have no shared anything anymore, except, they have the kids, but, they don't talk to each other. And this was 5 or 6 years ago that they got divorced. And yeah, they squandered whatever pension kind of situation they had for themselves. And they have, so, like, what a waste,
Yeah.
just because of this divorce.
Yeah. Shit.
But
Well,
listen, their life.
yeah. No, that's a good attitude to have about it, I think. So I wanted to come back then to the opera thing. So when did that start coming in? Like, were you always a musical
No,
kid?
not at all. No, I mean, we always had an appreciation for classical music and things like that, but never the opera, and never, well, for music in general, we had an appreciation at the house. Um, but then no, I just was fucking around one time in the car, and I was singing along to something my dad was listening to. I think it was Mozart's Requiem, and he heard it and he's like, "Oh, you have a good voice." Like, basically, you figure out that you, as a male, you figure out you're an opera singer when you, after you pass puberty. So your voice
Mm-hmm.
changes, and all of a sudden, you have a lot more power in your sound. And then he's was talking with a colleague of his, and he said, "My kid has a voice, he could work for a fire department." And the guy said, "Oh, he has to go to the opera, you have to train him." The guy's connected at Lincoln Center somehow. And my dad brought it up to me, and he's like, "Yeah, it could be really interesting. Why don't we go check it out?" And we did. And then fucking threw my life away on that bullshit. I mean, here's the thing. He said to me, and I agreed with him then, I agree with him now, is like, at least it'll be interesting. It's a really interesting path. Like, learn a bunch of languages, met really interesting people, sang across the world. Like, it was really an amazing thing. But like any art form, like I say it was just because I haven't pursued an operatic career or lifestyle for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's an insanely difficult and competitive kind of profession, which is 100% the opposite of stand-up comedy. Like, the only thing that could be more opposite than stand-up comedy than opera is, I don't know, like, being an astronaut or something. It's so different than stand-up. So much.
So
So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like, so is it do you mean like that there's kind of this, I don't know, independence with comedy, and also like that it's really, I mean, of course, I think it can help if you know somebody, but I mean, really the audience is dictating if you're successful
Yeah.
or not to some extent. How is it,
Well,
which I could imagine might be different in an art form like opera.
so from the point of view of performing it, in opera, not only is everything written out for you, and it has been written out for you for the last 200 years, and it hasn't changed. It's written out to a degree that it tells you how you're supposed to say it, when you're supposed to say it, what pitch you're supposed to say it on, how long you're supposed to hold a note, what dynamic, it's so regimented. And within that regiment, you have insane ability to create and express. Um, but
Wait,
but there's
wait, sorry, not to interrupt, but like where, where? Because what you just described, you're like, when you
I
sing
know
it,
it's
how you
weird.
sing it, the pitch. It sounded like
It's weird.
basically every detail.
So because you have so much structure, like the paths of expression are so defined for you. So you have basically, when you're an actor and you decide, like, and you're doing some sort of experience thing, you get to decide whether you're angry or sad or whatever objective or emotion or whatever the fuck you want to do. Well, it's the same in opera, except you get to express it in a much more unconscious way. No one can say, "Hey, that's not a real forte, or that's not a real piano, that's not a real crescendo." Like, yeah, the conductor can tell you, but he can go fuck himself too, like, or herself, I guess, maybe. Um, and so, the structure of it gives you a lot of direction of how to channel your expressivity. So I don't know how much you know about music, but basically, Bach invented the structure of Western music that we have today, in the way we tune our pianos, essentially. And in so doing, in creating the structure of the piano, of this well-tempered clavier, he enabled you to play every piece on one instrument, because it used to be you could only play certain pieces on certain instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd go to some church in England and you could only play pieces in G major and whatever key on that organ. If you played anything else, it would sound out of tune. So by taking, it's a pretty big analogy, but by taking that structure and putting it into one instrument, it limited you and it kind of forced you into something that's not 100% free, but allows you to do so much more. So anyway, but opera does limit you in many ways and does regiment you, and also there's a tradition of how it's supposed to be performed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much recorded history of it, and because it's repetitive. I mean, it's really highbrow karaoke essentially.
Yeah. Is there any like new opera? Like, is there like a, like underground
it's called,
opera scene or something?
new opera is actually cinema. New opera is, The Sopranos. New opera, like those are, and when the reason that people started singing opera was that so you could hear them from far away. Like when the Greeks invented their theater, they had them in amphitheaters, and they sung all their lines. All these Sophoclean plays or whatever, all the lines were sung so that you could hear it better. And essentially that's the birth of opera comes from. But once you have microphones, you don't really need to sing the lines anymore. But if you listen to all cinematic music, is all operatic music. But I know it's not really your question, but like, is there a modern opera? There is. It sucks. No one wants to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to sing it. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. But that's also an
So,
interesting analogy of like, to think of, like, I don't know, I just never considered it in that form of like the evolution of entertainment or,
yeah.
storytelling or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean,
So
like, if you look at the history of opera, it basically stopped once we started having talkies, like movies
yeah.
with sound. Like you had, of course, some, like, Strauss was composed, and if you look at the bulk of the repertoire, it basically stops in the 1930s and 40s. Like, also the war killed off a bunch of people, so people stopped teaching
Yeah.
it. People, but it's weird because it became much more popular than it's ever been up until the 60s, 70s, 80s. Not like it became super popular. Now it's sort of dying out, but
Yeah. So obviously it seems like eventually you fell out of love with it to some extent, and I want to hear about that. But I wanted to start with more like what the experience was like when you started. You did it for a long time, so there must have been parts of it that you really fell in love with. Was it
first of all,
being on stage?
the material itself. Well, let's start. Screaming is amazing. Screaming is an amazing feeling, and it's a whole body experience. You use every part of your body when you're singing, and when you learn to control it in a way that you can do it for hours, it's an amazing feat. When you think of like what opera singers can do, it's really, really cool. The material itself, like, there are around 200 operas in the core of the repertory that are performed every year around the world. That's the cream of the crop. Like, that's been chiseled. There have been thousands and thousands of operas composed, and this stuff is the best material. So it's like the 100 best movies ever. Those are the 100 movies that you get to see over and over and over. So the material is amazing, right? On every level: philosophical, emotions, dramatic, it's acting, it's just insanely good. So that's the good stuff. The business is, like any business, is disgusting. The people in it are, like, again, really, generally speaking, the people that are running opera are usually bitter, failed people like me. They're like, they didn't make it somehow, or they said, okay, I'm going to be better off if I go in this direction of management or whatever. And there's so there are those people that run the business aspect of opera, but you also have singers, and singers themselves are super neurotic people, um, like way worse than comedians. And generally, they can't take criticism. You can't be honest with them. And I'm saying this because I am and have been that. Like, I'm not saying those people like that. I'm not, and I was that for many years. And there's it's a culture of really,
Why do you
obviously.
think that is? Like, yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking is just because when you said that, my gut reaction to that was like your voice being your instrument seems like stressful in the sense that it's something that you have control over, but not totally. I mean, even if the quality of your voice, right? Like there are just some people who are good singers and some people who aren't. So
Yeah,
that seems in itself.
the benefit of opera is that it's a real meritocracy, in the sense that, like, certain roles, like, um, if you can do them, you can do them, and it's inarguable. It's not like, oh, you can do it better or worse than someone. There are certain roles that if you can't do, you won't get hired for. Um, Whereas you take acting, you can say, oh, that's a good Hamlet, bad Hamlet, whatever. It's totally subjective. Um, but as to why singers are the way they are, um, we can't you can't really hear your voice. You're subject to minute. You can't really hear what's coming out. Like, what you hear when I sing is not what I hear, and I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's reading, whatever. So that's one thing. Minute changes in the way you feel, about you're ultra sensitive to everything about your body, because you have to, like, it's like an insane super athlete that's obese. Um, and and it's an extremely sensitive instrument. So it makes people extremely neurotic. More than that, it takes years and years and years to train and develop. I don't know, like, that could be wrong. That could be a mistake. I mean, there are singers that are amazing, that basically walked off a farm, and they're just amazing singers, and they have amazing, in the history, have had amazing performances and careers. Caruso was basically a world class singer by the time, in his early 20s. Today, it would never happen. Maybe that's wrong.
Mm.
Like, there's a huge racket around opera because there's so many failed singers that end up becoming teachers, that, like, they need to make a living. So you end up getting all these students, and of course, the more a student is a student, the more money you're going to make. So there's an inherent conflict of interest, and so there are a lot of pressures that make singers neurotic. Um, and the last thing is that, in terms of not being able to take criticism, your voice is you.
Yeah.
you know it's like, if I come to you, and you're a javelin thrower, and I say to you, hey, the way you throw a javelin sucks, like, go fuck yourself. It went further than yours, whatever.
Yeah.
But when I say, hey, your voice is ugly, it's like, that's your soul.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I say to you, I don't like the way your eyes look, it's like,
Yeah.
now, if you that's fine if you're just a guy, but if your career is based on me liking your eyes, it hurt. It hits deep. So singers are very sensitive about things like that,
Well, and
and
I
they're
imagine, and
constantly
it,
stacking themselves up against history. Like, do I sound as good as this recording? As good as this recording? No.
yeah. Well, and I mean, also, it's like my eyes is not something I can't train my eyes to be a different color, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah.
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 So then how long your dad takes you to this thing, you start on to this like interesting path. You mentioned you moved to the city when you were like 16 or 17. Was that part of kind of pursuing opera?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I went to conservatory. I went to Manhattan School of Music, and which was in Manhattan, oddly enough. And
Wait,
and
really?
yeah, in
Oh
Harlem,
shit. Okay.
when Harlem was Harlem, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I moved there. But I was basically half the year kind of studying around the world, and half the year in the city. And once I found opera, I was like, all right, how do I get out of high school as quick as possible? So I took some summer courses, graduated a year early, and then fucked off. Went to the city. I actually came to Berlin for the to learn some German. This was 16 years ago. No, 16, 20 years ago. And yeah, 20 years. I was 16. That was 20 years ago. And yeah, so that was for that purpose. Yeah.
Uh, so one of the we can move on from the opera thing after this, but it was one thing I was just thinking about. But you mentioned like you growing up and being kind of like a bigger kid and stuff. Was that like when you got into the world of opera and then suddenly
Oh, it
like
was awesome. I thought, I was under the impression, great opera singer, I can be fat. This is the best. Like, I don't have to worry about losing weight, which was wrong. Yeah, there are bigger people in opera. You need to be a bigger person in order to be an opera singer. Like, is an arguable point of view. I think it's true. You have generally to be a certain kind of singer. You have to be a bigger person. Both just like I'm pretty tall and I'm a big person. Even if I wasn't fat, I'd be a big person.
Mhm.
But I was also like quite wrong about that because the world changed, and now in order to be a successful opera singer, you also need to look good. You can't just have a good voice. You need to look good. You need to be a good actor, and rightly so. Like you think about it from a point of view of suspension of disbelief. If you're looking at someone who's supposed to be Don Giovanni, which is a guy that's seducing all the women, it's hard to do if he's 400 pounds and wobbling on a bad hip or whatever. It just, it doesn't matter how good he sounds. Like, are there 400-pound players that can fuck any woman they want? I'm sure, but I'm expecting someone to suspend their disbelief enough to accept that I'm in an opera house in a 18th century costume singing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you can't be you can't look like a couch anymore.
Yeah. So then what is the transition to you? I mean, was it like when you kind of started stopping doing the opera, were you like missing being on stage and
Dude,
that's
I
what
was
drew
fucking
you into
suicidal.
comedy?
I was suicidal. Like, in terms of, look, I came to Berlin actually to pursue opera, and
Mhm.
then and all this time, like my father was basically supporting me, and he was like my biggest patron. But at a certain point, I was like, all right, I can't. I can't be this much of a fucking millennial cliche. Like, I can't take any more money. Like,
Yeah.
enough. So I started working in some other things. I was writing. I was working in journalism a bit, and I went to an audition, and I just looked at the people around at the audition, and and I they were all like early 40s. It was from some shit little company here in Berlin, like performing, and I performed in living rooms in churches, and I did all that shit. And it was for some shit company that was going to perform in some nothing place. And I looked at the people around, and there were all these singers who were doing their best to put on their professional, I'm a singer face and I'm happy. Hi, good to see you. How you doing? And I was like, I don't want to be these people. So like the chances of me having the kind of career that I would want, um, the window, like anything could happen. I could walk down the street and find a lottery ticket and go and cash it in and win the lottery. But, like, is that my plan now, to go look for fucking lottery tickets? Like, it's just not something I want to, risk the rest of my life on. So I figured I was early enough, like I was 32, I guess. 33, that I was like, all right, I can start something new. But
Mm-hmm.
for all my adult life, like I would meet someone that'd be like, "Oh, what do you do?" I say, "I'm an opera singer." I say, "Oh, you're an opera singer? How interesting!" Whatever. Like it's much better than accountant in my mind. Like I'm sure,
Yeah.
you know, it's accountants are lovely people. I'm sure, whatever. But like it
But
was
there is
like it got me
there's
laid
like
a lot. It was fucking awesome to say that, and to all of a sudden make a deep voice for someone and have them be
yeah.
impressed, or and it was part of my identity in a major way. And I guess as a comedian, you can relate. Like you are this thing. Like you found this thing that you are. Like how lucky are you? And then when I remember when I run a restaurant uh, news site called Eatler, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember the first time someone introduced me as a blogger, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, ugh, it's so not
Your
that.
butthole just puckered.
Oh, it's terrible. A blogger. Ugh. I still hate it. I cringe when I think of someone introducing me as a blogger. Even as a writer, I'm like, I'm not that. And so yeah, like there were like between the time that I essentially stopped pursuing a career in opera and started stand up, it was like I was never like I'm gonna go home and kill myself, but I like once a day I would think it would be just so easy, just
Yeah.
just get a knife. I would just like it would just flit into my brain. I'd be walking down the street and be like, I could just walk in front of this tram. It'd be so easy, you know. And but that's like Louis says it too. He's like, yeah, I've flipped through the brochure, like
Yeah.
I kind of course I've had those thoughts, and I think anyone who risks anything in their life does, because that's what living is, you know.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think it's, life can just start to get, especially when like you're trying to make something work that isn't exactly the, well-worn grooved path of, certain,
Sure,
that are certain paths. Yeah,
sure.
sometimes it can just feel so immense and hard. It's just like, yeah, that was the thing that always like was the stopping point for me with my own like suicidal thoughts. Was it was just like I would like to be dead. I don't want to go through all of the shit of killing myself.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I never thought of like I guess it's the most selfish thing. Like I never thought of the people around me. I never thought like, oh, would they miss me? Like it never occurred to me. But I just thought, you know, it was just a thought that would come in and out of my brain. And be like, oh, I thought that. I wasn't particularly worried because I never thought like, that's it, I'm doing it. Um, I never reached those levels of sadness or whatever. So, and I had other things in my life that if I hadn't had, I think if I would have stayed a singer and ended up one of those singers that I saw in those auditions, I maybe, nah, I don't think I would. I don't know. It's not in my. I would probably eat myself to death before I committed any sort of real brutal act.
yeah. Well, so you stop performing and it's like it's taking a really like a toll on you. But did you have a connection to comedy, throughout your growing up? I mean, New York is kind of a mecca in some
Yeah,
ways, or at least, well, especially when you were younger, it
yeah,
was.
yeah. No, I never. When I think back on it, like I always eat my heart out a little bit because I don't know if that's the right term, but I always think what a pity. I lived in New York from 2003 until 2016. I could have fucking gone. I could have been like, I'm the same age as Mark Norman. I'm the same age as they all started exactly when I could have started. And like, man, what a waste. Like I could have been friends with Louis now. I could have known Patrice
Yeah.
O'Neill. I could have,
Yeah.
what a waste. But I was doing other shit, and like, Yeah, I was always peripherally interested in comedy. I remember, like, I memorized like the Eddie Murphy Delirious when I was a kid. Like all of us, we all watched Eddie Murphy Delirious. At least half the comedians I know, they watched Eddie Murphy Delirious, and so I would make all
Eddie
my
Murphy
friends.
was my first, like
Yeah,
my first comedy love.
yeah, Goonie Goo Goo and
Yeah.
Brontosaurus Burger and all this shit. Like, um, and uh, and so that was always there. I mean, I was always making people laugh and doing funny accents and things like that. And yeah, so I it was always there peripherally, but then and I always thought to myself, man, maybe one day I'll try it. I'll try and get on stage and see, when the time is right. When I'm in a bar with friends and there's a stage, and so who wants to try? Just come on stage and try stand up.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah.
And so then what was the steps leading up to you finally being like, all right, I'm gonna get it, sign up for an open mic or start trying to organize some thoughts of something that I'm gonna say
Yeah.
or
I have this friend here. She's a writer. She's like a food writer as well, and she was also doing some stand up. Really bad stand up and pretty good writer. She's a journalist, really weird person. Anyway, she's like, come see some stand up, whatever. So she took me to a show or something like that. And that was about, I don't know, 2 years before I started, right? So, but when I was there, I met Ori Halevi,
Mhm.
who was a comedian here in
Yeah.
town, I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
And so we became friends on Facebook. And then 2 years later, Lola, my wife, and I were watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel,
Yeah.
which is that stupid show on Amazon. But in the first episode, she just goes and does stand up. Like she walks into a bar and perchance someone hands her a microphone and she's half naked, whatever, and she does stand up and she's enormously successful. Now, in a parallel story adjacent to that, my younger brother was in real estate for the last decade. He owns a few buildings and apartments and whatever. But then and he's passionate about tattoos.
Hmm.
And he went and got some insane tattoo on his arm that I was like, I don't know, like whatever, 30,000-40,000 bucks or whatever the fuck.
Holy
And
shit. Yeah.
yeah, crazy shit, which is what these things cost now, right?
Yeah.
So, and then he started hanging out with the tattoo artists that tattooed him, the two best tattoo artists in the world in some famous shop, whatever. And he became friends with these guys. And then he started drawing. And within a month, he's tattooing. And within a year, he's making, 2-3 grand a day tattooing. And he becomes like a famous tattooer. He's tattooing, Machine Gun Kelly and Pete Davidson and like celebrities and whatever. And he's talented. It's not like he's by chance. He's really amazing at it and very artistic and very unique. But it just happened overnight.
Hmm.
So that's a parallel story. And then I watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and she goes and has this one night where she goes and she has an amazing success and it gets picked up and whatever. And she starts on this new life. So between my brother's story, starting a new life, and watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and knowing Ori's, I just said, fuck it. What the hell? I hate this writing bullshit. Um, the writing about astronomy was, I mean, I don't hate it. It was a job. It is a job. It's something that it's quite interesting, but in any case, different story. So I decided to give it a shot. And so I wrote Ori, asked him how should I do it? He's like, just sign up at Cosmic Comedy on their Facebook. And that's it. And I started.
What was that first time on stage like for you?
Well,
Was it
was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, as I remember it, I have a recording somewhere of it. As I remember it, I fucking murdered. It was great.
Yeah.
um, like, but here's the thing, like, it was a cosmic comedy, which I don't know if your listeners know, but like, it's an extremely live room, and the guy that runs the room does an amazing job getting the audience hyped up,
He's
and you can go on stage and say fuck all and get killer laughs. I mean, I've seen people eat shit there too, so it's not like okay, but like, no, I had some funny shit.
But it's a good room to like if you have a few decent jokes, like you can really
Yeah.
yeah, it can be a lot of fun.
And you know, my wife asked me, "What are you going to talk about?" Because I knew about a week or 2 weeks in advance, and like 2 days before, my wife's like, "What are you going to talk about?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just going to go and see what happens. You know, do it the Louis Patrice way." And she's like, "No, you can't do that. Like, you have to talk about something. What are you going to tell?" Like, so I made a kind of, I wrote down, went over material with her and whatever, and I had it ready. And then I went on stage and did none of that material. Nothing, not one joke, nothing. And talked about my dad's asshole, talk about Princess Diana and how I don't believe in God and the Holocaust. And and
Wait, so do you feel like being on because I feel like being on stage, it's like I mean, the more you do it, it gets like less nerve-wracking, but it's certainly still nerve-wracking, and sometimes to the point where I'm like, okay, that affected my performance. Like I tried something new opening and it ate shit, and then I was off kilter like the whole rest of the set or something. Do you feel like you were able to avoid some of that because you had the opera experience, or
oh, for
was it
sure.
still
Yeah, no, I actually quite like bombing. Like, I mean, of course, I love it when people laugh, you know, but
yeah.
like the first time I bombed, I was like, ooh, that stung. But it was a weird type of bombing. But then when I started bombing and realized, like, oh, now I have permission to do the really hard stuff. Like, cause fuck it, you guys aren't gonna laugh at what I prepared anyway. So let me just talk about the most taboo things and fucking retarded children and threesomes with my baby and you know, murdering my wife, whatever the fuck, you know, like, just saying
Yeah.
the I learned that I really love to push an audience to a really bad place. And so I really, but you know, I ate shit so much as an opera singer, like, and had so many, you know, it's weird. As an opera singer, you have 3 4 hour performances where you're on stage singing, you know, thousands of notes a night, and you'll crack one note and it ruins your performance for you, but the audience doesn't care, like, they don't know, you know. So I've had so many nights where I was like, oh, this was the worst performance. It was terrible. It was this, it was that, it was awful. That being on stage for a 5 minute set, it was like nothing. Like, I could eat shit for an hour and not care. So you know, it still doesn't bug me so much. Um, Bombing, like, I prefer bombing to having really like a tepid audience that like chuckles, and you know, or clapter. I hate clapter. That's the worst. You know.
Yeah. Or
Sometimes
for me,
if an
oh, go
audience
ahead.
will is like doing me favors or whatever, I'll just throw away the material and like and try and push them to maybe it's a mistake. I don't know. Like, I'm whatever. I'm new at this, but I just rather have fun myself than like whatever, have a mediocre evening, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that's like, I don't know, for myself, that's what I want to get to more of is, you know, that feeling of pushing the line a little bit. And that's also like what I really loved about, I mean, I never got to see you do stand up just like by yourself. I only saw you guys performing together.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, like the pushing that and also seeing you guys like feed a little bit off of the audience's reaction to that was like super entertaining.
Yeah.
And actually,
Well,
I
super different. Performing with Eyal, my performing partner, is very different than, like, also the material I end up gravitating to is, that we end up writing is different than what I would do on my own. Just because
mhm.
of the dynamic of the relationship.
So how did that get started?
Um, I was doing a mic down, I don't remember where, and Eyal was there, and he it was right, like, it was 2018, I guess, and Me Too was at kind of at its height, and so I think Eyal was there talking to someone in Hebrew about Louis, and I don't know what your stance is, whatever. Like, I'm a firm believer that I just don't think Louis did anything wrong. I think the only thing he did wrong was apologize. So we can argue about it if you want. It's fine. Um, but so they were talking about it, and I was like, hey, can I masturbate in front of you guys? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I didn't.
Yeah.
So that's how Eyal and I met. And then I didn't know he was a music act, a guitar act. Um, and I heard his bit. I thought it was fucking awesome. He's saying, I don't remember about what, but I was like, yeah. And we kept running into each other at some open mics, and then I was like, yeah, let's do something together. Actually, I said, why don't we start our own mic together? There's a Palestinian kid who owns a cafe here, Fabian, and he was there outside the club with us. And I'm like, when are we going to do a show at your place? We'll call it Tuesday, Tuesday. And he's like, all right, let's do it. So we did it. That was short lived because his family heard about it and they got pretty upset. So we only did one Tuesday, Tuesday at the Palestinian cafe. But Eyal and I started linking up and working together, and we wrote some songs together. And yeah, it was far, far superior to what either of us could do on our own. I'm still like, dude, as a stand up, I'm a baby. I've been doing it for 2 years. It's nothing. So I don't have the skills or the talent. But as a singer and a writer, I've been doing this for 20 years. So, when they talk about, you have to do it for 10 years and 10,000 hours and all that shit, like the synergy that Eyal and I end up having because we can relate on the same kind of esoteric level and philosophical level and whatever, it ends up becoming a much more polished product much quicker. And
Mm-hmm.
again, apropos like structure breeding creativity, you can't go on stage and improvise because it's music. Like, yeah, you have some jazz elements that are sheltered for improvisation, but for the most part, like 90% of our work is totally written out to the beat before we go on stage. And then once we go on stage, we adjust and adjust and adjust. Like when we write a piece, like once it's ready to go on stage, that's about 20% done.
Yeah. Well, that's,
And
at the beginning, I said like that I would always stay to watch you guys. And that's one of the reasons is like it's fun. And that's something I also didn't realize that I would enjoy in general about like when you're starting to see the same people at these different mics is it's fun to see like the way they're trying to tweak stuff and you're like, oh wow, like they changed that little tag at the end of that, or like, oh, you switched up where you put
yeah,
those lyrics or whatever, and it's fun to see like, oh, well, that didn't work as well actually,
yeah,
or
yeah,
be
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
totally.
shit, that really fucking works now, or something. Yeah, I
Yeah.
find that like really interesting.
We'll first we end up having 3 or 4 shows a night, so we'll end up doing the same piece 3 or 4 times, but 3 or 4 different ways, just to see what works. And like really all the 80% of the work is done on stage for that stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting, like, I don't know. I figure here's what ends up happening. We end up writing, we're like, we have an idea for a punchline or whatever, And then we're like, this will be good for a 2 minute, like a short, like 1 minute, 2 minute bit. And it ends up being a 10-minute song every
Yeah.
time. Because like it's the thing that it's intriguing you. And you're like we have this one song, you know, it's called Male Feminist. And it really started out as just one joke. Then you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're like, fuck, this thing goes so deep, you know, and like you start to like it goes so deep and you need to start cutting back and you're like, oh, this is 20 minutes. Like, you know, we have a piece on, on Hitler and it's like, you know, fucking 17 minutes long. It's like, Jesus,
Yeah.
this is like an opera. Fuck, you know. um anyway, so yeah, I guess I went far away from where we started, but that's essentially how we met. We started working together, and we started. I had never like I'd always done well. Like I was doing stand up for 6 months or almost a year maybe before and I started working together. I'd always done well. You know,
Hmm.
I would bomb every fifth or sixth time on stage, but like I would always get solid laughs every, you know, 15, 20, 30 seconds, but stupid material anyway. And when we started working together, it's the first time I was like, oh, this is what killing is like, this is what murdering is like. and and then all of a sudden, like, oh, I can get as many sets as I want. That's fucking
Yeah.
awesome. Because before it would be like, you know, 1 or 2 sets a week, but like
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're signing up and you're getting sets, and it's like it really is a meritocracy. You're like, dude, you can make people laugh, you're good, and people want you on their shows. And so it was a real affirmation that what we were doing is the right thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, so what is your guys' process? Like, do you have set times like this, you know? I mean, I guess obviously now things probably have been adjusted with the lockdowns and everything. And I know
Yeah,
he had to go back to Israel at some point too, right?
yeah,
But
he
typically,
went to well, typically and atypically. For instance, now during this last lockdown, we wrote, but like we've been working, we wrote another like 30, 45. We have about an hour already that we've performed. So we just wrote another 30 or 45 minutes during the last lockdown since November. It's like we're just sitting at home, not doing anything. Um, so typically, what we'll just start shooting the shit. Like I'll have some ideas that I've, you know, something that pissed me off or annoyed me, like, you know, some German did something German and I fucking hated it,
yeah.
and you know, like it, or something I saw on a podcast or you know, some philosophical thing that whatever, and we'll start riffing on it and writing, and like we'll just start dying laughing over something. And either we come, you know, Eyal will come up with a tune on the spot, or you know, he'll come back the next time we meet and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or usually we just, or like I'll be walking down the street and today I was singing a song, kind of a country style song. It's like, hold on, let me see if I can. Uh, I'll find it. Hold on, just so I can remember it, because I don't want to ruin it. This is my
Yeah,
performance.
no, of course.
Let's see.
This is good. This is where we're building a
If a thing is born with a penis, it's a man. And so that would be the beginning of a bit. And so like, you know, I'm super, like, I like to think of myself as irreverent, which is a nice word. I like to, like, I love picking at taboos, and I love being the wrong idiot. I don't
Mhm.
mind being wrong. Like, and I really don't mind offending people. Like, I really love arguing with people and things like that. So and a lot of times that's how we end up developing, you know, like Eyal will play the straight guy, I'll play a straight guy, he'll play the, you know, whatever, or you know, we kind of trade off. Like I'm the Archie Bunker, he's the meathead, or whatever the fuck
Yeah.
analogy. And and kind of playing on a lot of social things that bug us. But I'd have to say, actually, with the Corona stuff, we end up doing a lot more absurd, like weird, like because we're just so fucking stuck. We're in our head, like we
Yeah.
just do the weirdest shit. I'm like, this will probably be funny. I don't know, you know.
Well, I think also, I mean, to me, I think that's maybe like what we're gonna see more of in comedy coming out of this. I mean, it's been such like a weird and dark time, and yeah, like weird, absurd, silly stuff seems like exactly the mood with
Yeah,
the
I mean,
appetite.
like the best. There are a lot of fun things about working with a partner that you get along with. You know, it's not if it's not contentious or whatever. Like, yeah, if things are contentious, it can be a real fucking pain. But like when you're getting along with someone and you guys are sort of riffing and creating fun stuff, it's a great pleasure because you know that at least someone thinks it's funny.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of times, like I found myself like, you know, you're a comedian. You know, when you write something like, yeah, I think this will work. This will be funny. Like you can see something and know it's funny. But it's great when you say something and someone laughs right away. And that's the beauty of this art, I think, if you can call it an art, is that there's a it's totally merit based um and totally confirmable. Like you're getting confirmation that what you're doing is right every few seconds, which is something that you don't really have in any other art form. You know,
Yeah.
and it could be that you know, as artists, we're completely like completely dependent on seeking other people's validation. Um, but it's, I think, a really cool feature of this. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, for myself, you know, I do these like comedy sketch videos, and with the like lockdown and everything, lockdowns that have happened this year, I was like, great, I'll just like throw myself more into that. And at first that was fine. But like lately, I've just been noticing I'm really missing that
Yeah.
reaction when you get like you get an idea and you can take it in front of some people and be like, well, these at least these 7 people enjoyed
Yeah.
this original
Yeah.
thought I had, instead of just screaming out into the chasm of the internet. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, you get an idea and you're like, this is funny, and you take it all the way through, and then it's at the end and you're like, oh
You get like
no, I don't
12
this.
likes. Yeah, you get
Yeah.
12 likes, and like it's just so, it's like methadone. It just doesn't give you the high that you need. You know, it's this
Yeah,
kind of fake,
exactly.
like, so no, we did,
Well,
yeah, we
and
did a bunch of Instagram stuff, and it's like, this is not worth all the work. Like we wrote some
yeah.
what I think are really cool killer bits. We put it on Instagram and we're like, this fucking sucks. I hate it. Like I hate Instagram and I hate social media. And like doing this is just not fun, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing too for me, is it's like when I started doing it, it was really just like I was like, oh, this is like I enjoy getting an idea and shooting it and editing it and then seeing it
Yeah.
finished and the process of it. And I don't know, in the last couple months, then as you go along, as I'm starting to do them more, you start thinking like, well, you should try to like build an audience. You have to like learn how to do marketing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, then I catch myself watching these YouTube videos of like, how can you blow up on in YouTube in 2021? And
Yeah.
I'm like talking about, I like talking to my girlfriend about like algorithms and
Yeah.
like,
Right.
I mean, the thing is, if you're not pushing content 4 days a week, you're just not going to break through. And it's like,
Right.
what, this is not what this was about. Like, what
Torture.
the fuck
It's
am I
torture.
doing?
Exactly. Like, because that's why I became a comedian, because I want to be in lockstep with the rest of society. Like, that's exactly it's just, yeah. So I don't, I kind of, I basically got off of social media for the last close to 2 months. Like, I haven't been on Facebook and I haven't been on Instagram. It's fucking awesome. I don't miss it. I dread having to go back to it, if and when. the world opens back up. I don't want to create for it. You know, I guess it's a necessary evil now, or whatever it is. It's the only thing it was good for me was finding some material, maybe like people doing
Yeah.
dumb shit that pissed me off. I fucking hate hashtag activism, for example. I think it's so I found a lot of shit from that to think about and riff about. So, you know, it's definitely a weird time. The most depressing thing is, you know, feeling like this is a job. Like it's not like it pays well and you're doing something and it doesn't give you that much pleasure. So what's the point? You get 100 more people that press the stupid button. You know, it's stupid for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
No,
for my successful tattooing brother, it's the reason he became a successful. I mean, he's, like I said, he's super talented, but like the fact that he's able to do social media, the fact that he's able to do marketing, the fact that he has an affinity for it is what made him amazing. I mean, you look at the comedians today that are super successful, like in terms of building an audience and things like that. It's all social media. It's all branding. It's all, you know, like, and even where you don't think it, and even where you don't think of it. So you have, you know, that's the kind of, if you look at Kevin Hart or Dane Cook, like they started the thing with the MySpace or whatever, and like, and Kevin Hart still today is one of the top guys, whatever, like, but it's even where you don't think of it. Like the reason Louis became so powerful besides being the comedian that he is the fact that he was able to have this insane newsletter that he could talk directly to his audience in a way that no other comedian could. And then he'd say, hey, I'm producing my own special and you can buy it on my site.
And also, I think with that too, you know, like because like I remember when I signed up for his newsletter or whatever, and it was like the first time I felt like that I had gotten something from like any artist like that I was like, oh, you wrote this. Like, this is hilarious. I'm laughing out loud reading your dumb fucking email, and like even the disclaimer parts and like everything. And it was like you would see it as like, I'm excited, even if I'm not going to buy, you know, whatever it is or tickets. It's like, I'm still excited to read it, you know, which was genius.
Yeah, so I don't know, like it may be social media, may be its own little, it may be the devil that you have to deal with. Like, I don't know, like I kind of, I guess I get a little bit more stressed about it because I'm older than I am. Like, you know, this is my last rodeo. Like, if this doesn't, like I have other things that I can do and other job options and things like this, but this is I'm lucky enough not, you know, most people aren't lucky enough to find one thing that they love. I was lucky enough to find two things that I love. And I love it. I really love stand-up and performing, and it's an amazing thing. And if I could just pay my bills with it, it would be fucking awesome. So I guess I'm a little bit more stressed about it, and so Eyal is kind of more like, no, we'll just go do shows and it'll be okay. He's young and stupid. He's 10 years younger than me. So.
Well, how old are you?
I'm 36.
You're 36. Yeah. So because I have a little bit of that feeling myself. I'm 30, and the thing is, like, so I first started doing stand-up when I was 22. I went to this like comedy college in San Francisco that was kind of pretty. Yeah, it was pretty rough. There's someday.
When you say comedy college, it was like an actual college, like university.
No, it was like a couple failed comedians who had rented out like a shitty room in a building, and people would come. But the cool thing about it was that they had a bar that we could go up at whenever we wanted to. And so that was that was the cool part. So I did that for like a year, and then I like, I went away from it, and then I started doing it again like a year ago.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bit of that same pressure that you're talking about, where I'm like, fuck, like if I had stuck with it when I was 22 and not just started being like, doing stand-up is fun, but also ecstasy is really great. And got sidetracked with that for like 6 years. Then maybe I could be somewhere a little bit more exciting. But yeah, I don't know. I feel that where it's like I want to approach it with the like I mean, it's fun and it's an art form, but I also want to approach it with a level of like professionalism where it's like,
Sure.
I'm trying to do this and I'm not just like fucking around.
Yeah. Like I think that, so, there are the things that you need to do, in the States, for example, you're considered, a profession when you file taxes, is that profession. So if you go and you're a waiter, right? You're an actor by what you want to do in life, but you're waiting tables in New York, right? They'll only consider you an actor if you write down all your expenses that you've done for acting. So, how have you handled your entrepreneurial whatever as an actor? Have you paid for headshots? Have you done auditions? Have you, and so when you keep paperwork, you're considered that thing, which is retarded, I think, for artists, because artists don't work that way, but fine. And
Yeah.
and I forgot what was the point I was going to make. But in any case, like, I think that, all right, so for comedians, like, being serious is writing material. I think John Turturro, I saw him give like a master class or something like that, or Frank Langella. When he did, right, he put out his book and he gave like a book tour, and I saw him speak, and he was like, the job of an actor is to audition, not to act. Like, that's the work, is auditioning. And I think similarly with comedians, like, the work is writing, and like the more material you write, the more you're a comedian. And like, that's what being serious about comedy is. It's writing, like, however it is that you write, whether you write on stage or you write like in whatever, a notebook. Because it's really, and I actually think the more you throw away, the better you become, because you're forced to write more and better material. So, like, in terms of being serious about it, yeah, you have to have your website and you have to do your fucking social media or whatever. But like, really, what makes you, I think, I don't know if a professional, but makes you a comedian is if you're writing material. That's what being a serious comedian, I think, is.
So, and for you, and we wrap up here soon. I want to be conscious of your time, but like for that,
listen,
like,
I have 2 minutes of peace now because the kid's asleep. My wife is with the kid, and I can leave, so whatever. But like, we can talk all night. But I know you don't want to talk to me. It's fine. We can wrap it up, whatever you like.
Well, in that case, I have a few more things that I'd ask you about that, but no, with the writing thing, for myself, I mean, as you kind of said earlier, it's a little different with what you're doing now, where it's like you have someone to play stuff off of, but that's something I struggle with a little bit now, especially during the lockdown with writing. Is like you get an idea, but I feel like you can't really. Like I can write out what I think I would maybe try to say, but there's a lot more that needs to happen there that seems like it has to happen on stage. And I've been trying to be more conscious of like, okay, take some time every day to sit down and write stuff out. But also, sometimes it's like you get an idea and then that's when you write something. So how do you balance like creating structure versus just going with when the juices are flowing, I guess?
Well, did you ever see there's this movie, Throw Mama from the Train? This dumb movie with Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal. It's whatever.
Oh
it's
shit!
cute.
Yes, I yeah.
So he's a writing teacher in the Billy Crystal is a writing instructor in the movie, and his big line there is, "A writer writes always." I kind of believe that. Like, I've been a professional writer for, like, I've been paid to write for the last 20 years. And sometimes you just gotta fucking sit down and write a piece even though you don't want to. And like, it's a muscle for me that the more
Hmm.
I write, the quicker the ideas come, and the quicker the words come, the quicker they'll write. So it's okay. So if you're writing stand up and you're like, all right, I need a setup and I need a punchline and what a structure thing. Yeah, that's not very fun to write if you don't have an audience. So just don't write that. Just write down whatever you want. Like, if I can't think of what to write, I'll just sit at the computer or sit with a notepad and writing. I'm writing words. What am I writing about? I'm writing words that I'm writing in my pad and my computer, and my fucking computer is broken. And this goddamn keyboard for this stupid piece of shit Mac. What the fuck? Why would Steve Jobs were alive? This would never would have happened. And you
Yeah.
find yourself in a stream of thought of just writing, and writing. That's how it works for me, is writing actual things down. As if I don't write them down, they're stuck in my head, and then I really can't think of anything else. So whether it's just speaking into, like, I know Bill Burr, for example, writes all of his material on his podcast ranting. Like, just listen to his podcast. A year later, it's in a special.
Yeah.
Like, that's how he airs out his mind. And like, I don't know, a lot of people have different kind of structures and theories about it. For me, it's just I have to take even if when I write about the restaurants about Eatler, I basically sit down and write 4 or 5 hours a day. It has nothing to do with comedy. It just has to do with, how can I put this more succinctly? How can I take out some words?
Mhm.
This thing needs to be 200 words, not 300 words. And awesome, how can I make it clearer? And that's what writing does for me. It just helps me uh, find better words, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's also like, yeah, I feel like that is so much of comedy too. Like, I feel like I always come in with like a paragraph of that I'll like take onto the stage and leave realizing it's one line,
Nothing.
basically.
Right,
Yeah.
right, totally, yeah. I like Dorothy Parker. She's like, you write 4 words and take away 5. You know, this is
Yeah.
kind of, I love writing something and then taking shit out, take it out, take it out, take it out. I think that's really where, like, in the refining process, is really where your points are made. And when you realize that, I don't know, I'm a typical, to use the parlance of our time, cisgendered, patriarchal, heteronormative, whatever the fuck, male. And I love Hemingway. I love reading Hemingway. I think it's amazing. And I love the fact that he has the balls to write sentences that are short. And it's so impressive to me how much you can get across, again, with the structure of um, diminishing words,
Mm, yeah.
even
Yeah.
though you wouldn't guess it from this interview. I feel like I can talk so much. Yeah,
No, so one last question about writing, and then I just want to ask you a little bit about you coming to Berlin. But I so it's, as I mentioned, so it's like I've been into comedy since I was, early, like 21, 22.
Mm,
And I remember I saw a interview with Donald Glover back when he was like stand up at that point,
mm,
and he said Bill Cosby told him that you have to write with a pen and the paper. You can't write on the computer. And for some reason, even after everything that came out, I just still feel like I'm I'm a notebook, pen and paper guy, which does somehow slow me down and disorganize me. So I was just wondering if you had any uh feelings on like writing
it
on in a
definitely,
notebook
yeah,
or
for sure. Yeah, it's definitely different. You have, it's, it's a very tactile experience. Like, for years, I wrote journals. Like, I don't do it anymore, but maybe I should. But but basically it's this free form kind of thinking that relates very well to you just think about it this way. You have a wider, very technical point of view, of a more direct broadband connection,
Mm-hmm.
because the words are going from your brain to your hand, and you're doing sort of um, I don't know. It's kind of in a way more focused. It's more meditative when you're writing by hand. Um, but I don't know. It's an interesting, like, I definitely wouldn't stick with the whole. A real comedian does it this way. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, write the way you want to. Like, I've written plenty of shit that's been successful on my phone and my computer, or just recorded audio, and then what ends up happening with what I do with Ayala is we really don't write stuff down until after we have a few minutes of the bit already kind of worked out, and then we'll start writing it down and then refining it and things like that. But for me, writing is it's more about getting shit out of the way. So however you like
Mm-hmm.
to get shit out of the way is what I think. There's no wrong way to wipe your ass,
Yeah.
except you don't want to do it with a pen. So
Yeah.
might hurt.
Or back to front if you're a woman. But
I do back to front. I don't know, but I also clean my balls. I don't. My butt's too big
yeah.
to go around the side. But like I dig underneath, dude. I'm fucking digging a trench.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to ask you, like, how did you end up coming to Berlin then? Were you said you were coming to kind of pursue opera here, or
Yeah.
was it
Um, I have two of my brothers live here. They're in
mm,
gastronomy and nightlife here in Berlin, and so they were already here. And Berlin is the capital of many things, among which is opera. It's kind of you can audition here for tons of places. There are a lot of opportunities. There are more opera houses in Germany and more performances in Germany by far than anywhere else in the world. Like, there are 1,000 performances a year, like in a normal year of opera in the States. There are like 8,000 performances a year in Germany.
wow.
So a lot of singers come here for opera, to pursue opera. So I ended up coming here, and like I said, I'd come here initially to study 20 years ago for a few months, but since then I was coming back every year or so to visit family or whatever, and then
Is
initially I
that
was
how you were
coming.
able to? Oh, sorry, but is that how you're able to move over? Is you have family, so you have like legal eligibility, or did you have to get a visa
No,
somehow?
no,
Or
I got a visa and did it that way. But no, actually, I wasn't planning on staying. I was just gonna come for a few months, and then what? Like, I knew Trump was gonna get elected. Um, when he came down the fucking escalator, I was like, dude, this guy's. I was certain. I was 100% certain he's gonna get the Republican nomination.
yeah,
But by the time, like, I came here in the summer of 2016, like, by the time I moved here, I was pretty certain that shit is gonna be pretty fucked up in the States. And it became. I saw actually a Bill Maher episode with who's that guy that writes Dilbert? This asshole,
oh,
Scott Adams, and
oh,
he
yeah, yeah,
explained it
yeah,
there. He's
yeah.
like, this guy has basically is a trained forget what's the word that he used, not hypnotist but mentalist, and or he's using those techniques and he's gonna
Mm.
win for sure. And I was like, the way that he explained it made perfect sense to me, and I was like, fuck it, I think I'm just gonna stay here. Like, I don't have really any opportunities and the only thing I had back in New York was my girlfriend, and she was gonna come here. Like I said, I think I'm gonna stay. She's like, okay, I'll come there, and we just stayed. And then Lola got a pretty decent job here, and I was doing the Eatler thing, and yeah, I made life. And we were eating for free because my brothers have a restaurant, so that's good. You
So
know,
that's
why
a
go
good.
back?
That's not a bad.
Yeah, and dude, it's like, I fucking can't stand Germans, and I can't stand the German language. But this place is fucking awesome, And if
Yeah.
I, and I'm sure Germans have something to do with that. Like, it's a really,
at least a little bit.
at least some of it. I think Americans should get more credit for this place, but I like, dude, fucking Americans, like they made sure this place was here. Like if it wasn't for Americans, this place would be fucking, Soviet bloc piece of garbage. So please, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it's an amazing place, and the comedy scene here is insane. Like I don't think we have this anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, that was like when I started back up, I started back up here in Berlin, and it was like, oh
Yeah,
fuck, like this is so cool. Like the first of all, there's something to me that's thrilling about like going on a show and there's someone who just fucking destroys whatever I could do on stage, and it's their like second or third language that they're doing it in. That really
right.
makes me feel like I got to get my fucking shit together.
It's funny.
Uh, yeah, and just like the fact that there are like really like good fun audiences, because then I went home in the
Yeah.
spring and now I had like the bug again, and so I was doing mics in San Francisco, which is where I grew up, and it was like, fuck, this is brutal.
Why was it brutal? Tell me. I'm really interested to know
just
what's the big.
it was just like well lit bars with with nobody, like,
Wow.
and just a bunch of the other comedians sitting around, and also, I mean, I I don't want to, like, I mean, I think it's like an overused trope about like the white guy comedian and everybody's like a white guy, but there's like more of a diversity of perspectives here, and it's like a
Yeah.
lot of like white dudes who work at tech companies who don't like that they're working at tech companies doing stand up in San Francisco. At least that was my
Right.
experience,
Right.
and then people who just kind of like didn't make it out, and yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I didn't have a great time. Maybe if I had been there longer and I could have gotten into some better rooms, it would have been cooler,
Yeah.
but it
But
was, yeah.
and in terms of the audiences, like when you did have audience, did you feel any sort of different kind of like the
Um
audiences here? I find them to be like they're all first of all they're either English speaking Germans or tourists or expats,
mhm.
mainly tourists and expats. And when you have tourists and expats, you have people that have left their home. Like that says a lot about a kind of person. Like they're people that had the courage to leave everything that they knew to try something else. So it's a very courageous audience, and like I wonder what it would be like to take some of the material that I do here and take it to an audience that's more sensitive, more conservative, more like I don't know. Like I hear all sorts of stories about audiences in the States, and I'm like, I tell you, the benefit of doing music is that you can't really get heckled. Like, cause someone could
Yeah.
start heckling you, but like the something that must go on, like that's
Yeah.
like I can't stop. Like someone has to really want to stop the show in
Yeah.
order for them, for you to stop. And when they do that, like we fucking destroy them. But anyway, so did you find like there were
I mean,
noticeably different or?
I don't feel like I really came into too much contact with like, a really overly sensitive audience. I mean, partly because there just like wasn't a lot of audience
Yeah.
mostly, but also, I mean, like what you were talking about earlier, where you were saying, that enjoy the taboos and, the incorrectness. I mean, this is also definitely my sense of humor or sensibility, I would say, as well. But I mean, I feel like that's something I could grow in, is being more courageous with my beliefs. And I feel like sometimes I stick to more of my material that's like it's my life. So it's like I kind of am controlling that narrative, and I'm not necessarily
Yeah.
sharing opinions on larger ideas. Uh because it is, I don't know, it's a weird time. And I mean, I don't like all of the people who are kind of like the censoring cancel culture thing. But I'm also annoyed by the people like within the comedy world who seem so obsessed with cancel culture and like, I'm probably going to get canceled for saying this. And it's
You're not
like,
important
it's
enough to
all
get canceled.
annoying.
Get the fuck up.
Yeah, exactly.
I just, you know what? The thing that annoys me more than anything is just cliche. It's like, dude, you're a cliche. Like whether you're a black dude that's just coming on stage and just being black, or whether you're a fat fuck just coming on stage being a fat fuck, or you're an audience that's it just hasn't thought about anything and you're just repeating cliches that you've heard. Like, to me, that like, my theory is that if you get offended, that means you gave up your power to me, right? If I
Hmm.
offended you, it means that I have power over your psyche, and I refuse to be offended. Like, if something bugs me, I'd like to, of course I get offended, but I would never say, hey, that person is offensive and we should shut them down. um but but I like to think, why did that bug me? Why did that annoy me? You know what I mean? And I think that people that say I'm offended are really people that are saying I want to have power over you. You know,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah. It's weird. The like getting offended over jokes also is just it's a weird idea. I mean, like the premise is like I'm saying something I don't totally believe, or like I'm trying to say something to be funny.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, but
yeah,
yeah, I was just, when you were saying that, it made me think like, I can't really think of a time I've ever been like offended by
yeah,
a joke, really. But I don't know.
yeah. I definitely get annoyed. I get more annoyed at, at people that are lazy about the points that they make. Like, Chris Rock told a joke the other day, and I'm like, that's just whatever joke it was. I remember I was like, that's just not true. Like, you could just do literally 5 seconds of research and find out that the point you're making is bullshit. And it just annoys me because he's a talented comedian. It's like, you lost a fan because of it. Um, so shit like that annoys me. I don't know, like, because of the cliche, because you never really thought of it. You're like, it's someone, when you come across someone who has a set of beliefs, and they're a Democrat or they're Republican or whatever they are, and okay, they're against abortion, so they're also for guns and they're for the death penalty, and they're all like they do check mark on everything that makes them a Republican, but they haven't actually thought about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, or the same thing with a liberal. They said, like, they haven't actually said, "Oh, wait, is this right or wrong?" They're just going along with a kind of religious notion of what is right and wrong. And I don't know. And I find the same thing in comedy. It's really, to me, is the kind of biggest sin you could do. I don't care if you'll bomb. Like, for me, I love it. I love people bombing. I love to see them trying shit that's strange. And whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Me as well. It's like I always, when you're in the audience waiting to go up and stuff, and you see someone who is trying something that's a little more like unorthodox or bold. Like I don't know. Anyone who's taking a risk, that's as your dad said, that's interesting.
Yeah,
It's going to be
totally.
interesting. Yeah.
Well,
Well, do you have anything else that you want to add? I feel like we've covered a lot tonight.
Yeah, I feel like I might just masturbate a little and go to sleep. You're welcome to
Well,
hang around while I do that. I don't want to lure you, but
yeah.
I'm masturbating right now. Just so you know, my hands are.
Yeah.
Look, no hands.
So it's not a curtain behind you; it's a door. I didn't realize it was you're standing
It's
between
a
me and the
window.
door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's a hotel room. I keep telling myself, they're hotel rooms. They're small. Like if I stand in a hotel room, anywhere in a hotel room, no one can get out because they're small. Like, and I'm huge, and Louis is a big guy. Anyway, whatever. I don't have to get into the Louis thing, but yeah.
No, yeah. I mean,
No,
did
I'm good. It's been such a pleasure chatting. Maybe we can do it again sometime in real life. It's fucking awesome.
yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I hope that we're able to get back out there at some point.